Yes, indeed. Taste Sick and Consider podcast. That was that uh song from the new Sir album. That song was titled You. Good album, good album. I'm a big Sir fan. But we back for another episode. Yes, indeed, we are back. Feels good to be back. But let me officially introduce the show. It's the Taste to Consider podcast. I'm your host, Derek Silver, and we are back for another episode 112, 112, room 112. We back for another episode. Yes, indeed. Shout out to everybody who's listening right now. Shout out to everybody who's watching right now, all the new YouTube subscribers, all the old subscribers, all the old listeners, new listeners, all that good stuff. Um, Shout out to everybody who've been viewing the new shows up on the YouTube channel, Taste to Consider Network. We got Taste Reviews Drink Edition. I just released a new episode 14, Traveler Whiskey. Review on that one. Check that out, as well as a new episode of Tasteful Words. I believe it was episode 8. And, it's hard to keep up with all of this, doing it all by myself. But yeah, got a new poem released as well called Your Portal. Check that out. Make sure you like, download, share, all that good stuff. Hold on, burp number one. I put up 2 fingers because I did burp right before I started, so that was still in my mind. But yeah, check out the new shows. Make sure you like. It costs you nothing, and it helps get the shows out there to more people. Appreciate you. Like, it really costs you nothing. You could just hit one little button. If you haven't already hit the notification button on YouTube, make sure you do that. Yeah, so we back for another episode. I let a week go by. I had to get this episode together as well as the other episodes. Like, it's doing 3 shows now is difficult. Like, I was talking to my barber a couple of days ago. He was like, "Damn, you doing all that by yourself?" And most people just think it's just throwing the camera up or whatever, but it takes a lot to do all of this. The planning that goes into it, particularly when it comes to the poetry show. Shoot, I actually have to write something. But luckily, I had a lot of stuff written already when I was just in the flow. But those things are dwindling down. So I gotta I gotta catch up with my writing on that front. But with the whiskey show, I do that bi-weekly. Bottles cost. So, yeah, speaking of that, if you want to donate to the show, you can Cash App RIP 81. That's my Cash App. All that's in my link tree though. For the people who follow me on social media, my link tree got each and every link on there, every audio streaming link on there from Spotify, Google Play, Apple. I don't remember the other ones, and as well as YouTube on there as well. So yeah, Cash App on there too. So if you want to donate to the show, and like I said, if you don't want to donate to the show, hitting the like button is free. It is really free. I mean, but yeah, so we here back for another episode, and just going back in when I was editing the most recent episode, I felt like that last topic, I felt like I rushed through it when I was talking about suicide, and I played that one clip that segued me into the suicide conversation and my personal experience with suicide, and I felt like I kind of rushed through it or whatever. Probably because, what I'm saying, I was kind of nervous about really exposing that, not even exposing it, but sharing that information for the first time with anyone. So I'm gonna backtrack a little bit and start the show off with that. So let me pull that clip up from the last episode. Here we go right here. And I'm going to play this right now.
Now, obviously, I'm pro therapy, and the whole Brother mission exists to connect Black men with therapists. But it's possible to be pro therapy while also recognizing that therapy isn't the universal solution for everyone. Here's why.
Okay, so I'm reading a report that's saying suicide is the leading cause of death for men under the age of 50. And between the United States, Canada, and the UK, suicide is the single largest cause of death for men under the age of 50. And it's crazy. Typically, when folks hear stuff like this, their response is men should just open up more. If men talked more, less men would take their own lives, or more men need to go to therapy.
Let me let him finish that last bit of thought off before I start talking, because I think that's important.
However, the study is bearing out that most men who take their lives very often are in therapy. And a study in the UK found out that 92% of men who took their lives were actually seeking help at the time that they died by suicide.
So I feel like that point was very important, because what I mentioned last episode was that around the time when I really started having like these suicidal thoughts, I was actually in therapy. I just started doing therapy. And one of the things that I didn't mention that I was thinking about after I recorded was this is just based off of my experience. I can't speak for nobody else. When I first started out going to therapy and having a lot of conversations about my childhood and my past and stuff like that, and current situations in my life at that time that were mirroring stuff that I was going through in my childhood. And it was overwhelming. It was very overwhelming at the time, and not really understanding therapy at that point, just starting out and understanding healing really. Like, we all know what the word healing means, but actually understanding what healing is when you actually going through a healing journey is something totally different. And it was overwhelming, like all the stuff that was I was uncovering or realizing for the first time, and understanding how my past, my childhood, was mirroring my current life or whatever, things that, I was going through, things that I was allowing people to do to me, so to speak, or things that I was allowing myself to go through, because it's not necessarily putting the whole blame on everybody. But a lot of things were the same, you know what I'm saying? It's a saying where it says, I know I'm about to mess it up. It's not verbatim, but basically saying, how your past life will predict your future life. And that's pretty much what it was. I was going through a lot of situations where I was dealing with people or situations that weren't healthy for me, because I didn't have any boundaries in place. I didn't know anything about putting boundaries in place and stuff like that. And another thing that was overwhelming was the fact that, the way my mindset was already set up based off of my childhood, I looked at it like, damn, I got a lot, a lot going on. How am I going to tackle all of this and stuff like that? So, bringing a lot of this stuff up at one time was overwhelming. It became very frustrating also, very emotional, in many ways, where I felt as though, I'm already at this age of 30, maybe 31, 32, between the ages of 30 and 35 at that time when I was first starting out going to therapy, that like, how am I going to overcome all of this? When I got also real life, real world, quote unquote, real world adult stuff going on, where I got a mortgage, I got a car payment, I got these bills, I got to maintain a job and all this other stuff. You know what I'm saying? I want a wife, I want kids, stuff like that. I want healthy, I want friendships and stuff. And, you know what I'm saying, how am I going to deal with all of this at the same time, you know? And I wasn't really fulfilled in my life. You know, I wasn't happy with the way my life was. I wasn't happy with the relationships that I had. Um, I wasn't happy with myself. So it became a real burden and stuff. And it a lot of times, you know, those thoughts will pop up of, you know, of me just feeling tired, you know, emotionally, mentally, and that translated into physically. And even before I started going to therapy, I would have moments where I would think about, you know, suicide. And that was one of the reasons why I ultimately started going to therapy, when I felt like it got to the point where I was sick and tired of being sick and tired. And that's when I finally started going to therapy, you know, at the advice of my mentor at the time, when I was sharing a lot of things with him. So it's very, you know what I'm saying, real out here when, you know, a man gets overwhelmed, and particularly black men, you know, we get overwhelmed and we feel as though that we don't have any outlets. We don't have healthy relationships or good relationships or connections that allow us to be vulnerable and to talk, you know, certain things through or get things off our chest without looking weak or feeling emasculated and stuff like that. But back to the clip.
Now, here's what's mind blowing. Out of the 92%, 80% of them were deemed to be low risk to no risk of suicide. What is all this saying? What this is saying is we don't know how to read men. We don't know when men are hurting and when they're not, and when they're at risk or when they're self-destructing. Now, I've got nothing against therapy. I see a therapist every 2 weeks. Therapy is great. However, therapy is not the only answer and not the number one answer to self-destructing men. The solution for self-destructing men is also a part of the problem. See, most of these men are lonely. Most of these men have no friends. Most of these men are disconnected. So I'm going to say it. The number one thing that men need more than anything else is to be a part of a positive brotherhood.
And I mean, this pretty much pointed out my whole life at that time, and just period. Even though I had people that I could call, quote unquote, call friends, and I had associates, I had a social life. You know, it wasn't me just always sitting in the house alone, especially when I was in my 20s. You know, I had a social life. You know, I was going to the clubs, hanging out with friends, stuff like that. And when I became 30, that's when I moved into my home. You know, I became a homeowner and stuff like that. And that's when my social life started to dwindle, you know, a lot. I gone through a period where I started to realize the friendships that I had weren't really healthy friendships for me. And as I, you know, became older, I'm 42 now, and gone through therapy for over 10 years at this point, that I started to see even more how those connections weren't really connections. They were almost what's the correct word I want to use? They were almost I can't really think of the word, but they were they were just they was just filling a void for the moment. You know, not to say that these aren't, you know what I'm saying, these weren't good people or anything, but the relationships and the connections weren't they weren't fulfilling, they weren't necessarily always healthy, and they didn't provide always a healthy or safe environment, you know, and that's how I grew up, you know. I grew up in the household, burp number 3, burp number 4 and 5. Damn, burp number 6. This is about to be a great show. Burp number 7. This is about to be an awesome show. But seriously, I grew up in a household where nobody talked to each other. There weren't really no connections. You know what I'm saying? I didn't really see my parents communicating like that. I didn't communicate with my parents like that. Me and my brother didn't really communicate like that. So even to this day, that is our dynamic. My immediate family, my parents and my brother, we don't communicate. We aren't close. We don't really have a connection. So I looked at that as being normal. So I went through a long period of years with these so-called friendships with the same type of thing. But once I started going to therapy and started learning more about myself and learning more about emotions and healthy connections, healthy relationships and stuff like that, I started to see that this isn't normal. This isn't healthy. As I always say, this ain't cool. This ain't cool. And this is something that I craved for. I finally started to come to the grips and realize that the people that are in my life, even to this day, that I can't get that from them. So I'm going to have to give that to myself until I find a new tribe. If that, what I'm saying, if that ever happens. But the most important thing is giving that to myself and being comfortable enough with myself to, be able to go throughout my days, my weeks, my months, and my years being my best friend, because I'm not going to be able to count on the people that are still currently in my life for that same thing. And that's not everybody that's still currently in my life. That's just, a select few of people. But that's all I knew. That's all I knew. And that's what I know to this day. Um, and it could be extremely lonely. I did several shows talking about this. I remember one of the shows that I did during the pandemic. Um, Dang, I just had the name of the show right in my head, and now I can't even remember. But basically, I think it was like living in quarantine or something like that. But basically, that show was talking about how um, I've been living in quarantine for years. You know what I'm saying? This is something that I'm used to. I'm used to being alone, being lonely, spending time alone. You know, so that wasn't nothing that was new to me. But let me get back to the clip.
A positive brotherhood.
This reminds me of three things that I always say men, black men in particular, we need in addition to therapy. And one of those things is recognizing that making it look like we're okay isn't the way to go. So part of what he raised is that people aren't able to read black men properly. And while part of that is people not prioritizing understanding.
And before I let the clip finish, one of the things that I've definitely noticed a lot is, and this was a poem that I've been had an idea of how black men are just not seen as human. We are not seen as human. We are not seen as having feelings. We are not seen as having emotions. We are not seen as being valuable. We don't matter. And I know that may go over a lot of people's head, particularly people who aren't black men that's listening to this show and people who aren't empathetic and compassionate enough to put themselves in the black man's shoes. But that's how a lot of black men feel.
Us and our communication and how we present. Part of that is also on us because we've defined masculinity as suffering in silence or not airing.
And that's true. We've got so used to the narrative or to the program that we follow and push that same narrative and that program out there to the world. And even if we do deviate from that, we get called names. We get called, shoot, let's be real. We get called sassy. We get called gay. We get called a mama's boy or whatever words you want to use. Soft, those are the terms that get thrown out there if we deviate from any type of quote unquote masculinity.
Your concerns, suppressing everything, smiling, saying I'm good when you're not good. So it's on us to kind of to make that.
Shit, honestly, I still struggle with it to this day. Even with the amount of years that I've gone to therapy, with the amount of years that I've put in work on myself, that I continue to put in work on myself, I still struggle with it because it's been part of me longer than what I've actually been working on. So I'm still a work in progress.
Not our norm anymore and normalize a new approach. And that ultimately goes back to how men respond to other men, but also how women respond to men when they do share deeply about what's going on. So that's a cultural thing that we have to address. Second is going to be decentering women. So oftentimes the assumption is that a straight man will obviously put all his time and attention into the women he's trying to sleep with or date. And that is a big part of why men are lonely, feeling symptoms of depression, because they're putting all their eggs in the basket of romantic situations.
And when I went back over this clip, I was like, dang, he is right. When you think about it, and this is just from my perspective, that's the only place that we see that we can get love, or that's a possibility where we can get love, is in a romantic relationship. Any type of intimacy or whatever, even if we don't understand what intimacy is. And there's a lot of men out here that don't understand what intimacy is. Black men. I mean, let's be real. Like, I didn't really understand it until I started going to therapy. I thought intimacy was just all about sex. I didn't understand intimacy was more than just sex. I didn't understand that intimacy had to do with a lot of vulnerability, communication, you know, having those uncomfortable conversations, Back to the clip.
So singleness ends up feeling like hell. So while it's completely understood that people want to seek out partners, that can't be the totality of your life or
Right.
be the only thing that brings you joy. And unfortunately, for a lot of men, the only moments of joy they feel are when a woman gives them the energy back that they're putting out. Lastly, I want to say that we need to emphasize deep friendships. So, in addition to decentering women as the end all be all of life, it's also going to be, what do your friendships look like? Because so often we'll spend 10, 15, 20 years around a certain guy who we say, that's my friend, that's my homeboy, that's my brother. But the conversation is very surface level.
And that's what I was just talking about. Like, I've had plenty of people who I've been around for years, but every conversation is surface level. Nothing goes deep at all. We only bond based off of the typical male stuff: sports, drinking, hanging out, looking at girls or whatever, video games, whatever. And I mentioned it even like on the last episode when I was like, what I'm saying, just me getting older, growing, maturing, evolving, what I'm saying? I want to do different things, what I'm saying? I want to be involved in different things, what I'm saying? Why can't I have a book club with other guys? Why can't, and it's funny because, like, I don't know, for the people who watch the show The Shy, like on the last season on The Shy, the men on the show, the black men on the show, started having a group session, and it was set up like it was AA or something, but it was just them getting together and just speaking about, what I'm saying, stuff, no judgment or anything like that, speaking about stuff that was going on in their life, things that they just wanted to bring up, no judgment or anything. And I had that idea like 2-3 years before I seen that episode of The Shy. And when I saw that episode of The Shy, I wasn't pissed, but I was just like, damn, that was kind of like a confirmation of me putting it out there. But I was afraid to put it out there because I felt like nobody was going to show up. But yeah, the relationships are just so surface level these days. At least from my experience. I don't know about any other black man's experiences, but it's like we afraid to go deep. We just like really afraid to go deep until it gets to the absolute point where we have no choice to get deep. when something goes bad in our lives and we need, you know what I'm saying, our boys or our brothers support or whatever.
Or we have friendships of utility, which pretty much means that we connect around a shared interest: football, rap, whatever it may be. We're connecting based off of that. And when you remove that shared interest, there is no relationship there. Or when you remove proximity, we're not in college.
Right. And that's just like at the point I'm at right now, is like I'm tired of, you know what I'm saying? I'm 42. I'm not married. I don't have any kids. So my focus is not trying to go to the club or be hanging out all the time and drink. You know what I'm saying? Just because I got a drink show and all that other stuff don't mean this is what I'm just trying to hang out to do all the time. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to do different things. And even, you know what I'm saying, just with my drink showing and anything like that, you know what I'm saying? It'll be cool to include people in that and stuff like that. But it's just like, why is it the only time I get to hang out with people is for a sport event, or because somebody, it's a big fight going on, fight party, or you know what I'm saying, it's summertime and we going to a pool party or cookout or some shit like that. You know what I'm saying? It's never just uh nobody's really reaching out or anything like that. You know what I'm saying? Nobody's calling, texting, and you know what I'm saying, having like some check-ins, conversation or nothing like that. And it's to the point where I'm like, I've always noticed myself being the one to initiate these things, and I need to start putting that energy into myself, checking in with myself as opposed to always doing that to feel as though that I'm keeping a connection together or a connection alive.
Anymore. So now we don't speak because we're not in the same dorm. We have to work at building more substantive relationships so that we have a support system, and then recognize also that there are ways to feel a level of intimacy, not necessarily sexual intimacy, but emotional or relational intimacy outside of romantic relationships that can gratify you and through your friendships and platonic relationships too. And I'll close with this. It's true, I'll say from my experience, many men come into therapy thinking they need to improve their dating life, or that a relationship or more activity with women is what they need. And that's because they vaguely understand that they want intimacy, need intimacy. They wouldn't say it that way, but they think the only way to achieve that is through sex. When in reality, intimacy is not inherently sexual, and it can be achieved through a variety of other platonic relationships. In fact, if you're pro monogamy, you're only going to have one partner per se, but then you have all these other relationships that you could and should be investing in.
Right. And that's something that I spoke on earlier. Your romantic relationship is not going to be the only relationship in your life. So I talk about that all the time on the podcast, how you got multiple relationships throughout your life. You got work relationships. It's just a ton of relationships you got in your life, and just putting all your eggs in one basket, thinking that it's going to fill a void or fulfill yourself, is not going to work. And this is something that has to be pushed out there more with black men. You know, we sitting around a lot of times and, you know what I'm saying, craving intimacy, but we think that it can only come from our partner, the person that we're in a relationship with, and we not putting any type of effort into the other relationships that we have. We not thinking about the potential of the other relationships that we have with our siblings, with our parents, with our, you know what I'm saying, quote unquote friends, our associates, you know what I'm saying? Just finding new avenues to create that intimacy, you know, even just getting in touch with yourself, with your inner child, you know what I'm saying? Going back and getting, you know what I'm saying, doing stuff that you used to do that made you happy when you were younger, you know what I'm saying? A sport, a hobby, stuff like that. That's intimacy right there. Intimacy with yourself. And I don't think that's talked about enough. Having intimate moments with yourself. You know what I'm saying? If you was a kid and you loved puzzles or crossword puzzles or, you know what I'm saying, video games, you know, how the world tries to shame us men, particularly black men, for playing video games. You know, it's it's crazy. But you got whole adults out here, particularly white kids, white adults, whatever you want to call them, making millions of dollars playing video games every day. It's beyond me. But yeah, I wanted to backtrack and talk about that. So we're gonna get into the Blackety Black Woke segment. And I'm just gonna point out some things that I came across lately. So starting off, it says Supreme Court Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson concerned the First Amendment is hamstringing the government from censoring its citizens. Isn't that the whole point of the First Amendment? Like, the whole point of the First Amendment is so the government can't censor its citizens. It's free speech. And this is coming from a Democratic appointed judge, a black woman. And I'm not saying that to be to have any type of ill intent on black women, but just pay attention. How I've talked about plenty of times on this podcast of how the Democrats stay using certain black women to push agendas. And here we go right here with that. But I'm not even going to go further. I'm just going to move along. I got a clip for you. Let me pull this clip up. I got it saved in another area of my phone. Let me pull this up. Here we go right here.
Here's a question for you. How far can the Biden administration go to combat disinformation online? That's the question before the Supreme Court today. The justices spent 90 minutes this morning probing whether White House officials can influence social media companies to take down certain content. A group of doctors and epidemiologists say the government violated their First Amendment right to free speech when officials pressured social media companies to take down their anti-COVID vaccine post. A majority of the court appeared to back the Biden administration, but 3 of the court's conservative justices questioned the administration's intervention.
This constant pestering of Facebook and some of the other platforms, and they want to have regular meetings. And I thought, wow, I cannot imagine federal officials taking that approach to the print media, our representatives over there. If you did that to them, what do you think the reaction would be?
Samuel Alito. Now, the justices are expected to rule in this case by June.
And I've already came with the receipts about how the government has been very influential with censoring its citizens through social media. So I feel like I don't even have to go further. Like, the truth is out there, but it's like a lot of people just want to just be blind to it because they so focused on supporting a side. It's not about supporting a side. It's about your interests, your people's interests. And we fail to forget that fact. We always focus on just supporting a side. I will say this again. I'm a registered independent. I don't care about Republicans or Democrats. What I care about is what's right and what's wrong. I care about my people, the black community, the quote unquote black community. So it says, Obama appointed District Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman rules illegal immigrants can possess guns under the Second Amendment. Here we go again. Illegal immigrants. This is a Democratic appointed judge giving rights to people who aren't even citizens of this country. And this is what has been going on since Biden has been in office. They've been giving everybody all these type of incentives, money, rights, laws, whatever, to everybody but black people, their biggest supporters. They giving money to Ukraine. They giving money over to Israel. They giving money to immigrants. They giving money to Asian Americans. They giving money to everybody but us. Everybody but us. So I'm gonna play this clip real quick, and we gonna go further into that topic. Let me pull this up. Here we go right here. This is a clip I came across that I thought was interesting and, you know what I'm saying, matched up with some of the topics in the Blackety Black Woke segment. So here we go.
Why is the borders open, though? Because the United States is in a real tough pickle right now. My generation, we worked hard. I worked for Verizon. But my kids, your generation, y'all not going to do sanitation work, pick up garbage. Y'all not going to be postal workers. Y'all not going to be electricians. You're not going to be plumbers. You're not going to do constructions. Y'all starting podcasts. Y'all thinking about other ways of making money. What does that mean if these jobs are not being filled? They create programs for the migrants where they're giving them rent. They're giving them money. In Chicago, they have a program where they give them $9,000 every 6 months. So that's $18,000 a year for rent. That's an average of about $1,500 to $1,300 a month. That's good rent for somebody, right? So now they living in all these places. Your generation, your kids, y'all are not buying houses, bro. So you know what that is? Y'all not getting mortgages. United States needs people to get mortgages. Y'all are not going to college no more. Y'all not creating college debt. United States needs college debt. Y'all are entrepreneurs. Y'all are not joining the military. The military is depleted. That's why they're having things like proxy wars, where they got the drones dropping bombs because they don't have enough military. Y'all are not doing the things that I did, my grandparents did when they came here. So they bringing in millions of new people who are going to do these things.
This dude sounds stupid and out of touch. Stupid and out of touch. One of the things that has been plainly obvious with the way society has been going today in the United States with the Democrats right now is that they're trying to find a new base. They're putting a new base in place for them to stay in a position of power. I've talked about this for years. It's 2024. I've been talking about this since 2021. And it kills me when black people don't even see this. This was a black dude talking, and he don't even see it. Let me read this for you right here. It says, New York City has officially started giving illegal immigrants prepaid debit cards as part of $53 million program using taxpayer funds. The illegals must promise to only spend the money on food and baby supplies and will receive up to $1,400 per month. If you watch the news and pay attention with a critical thinking mind, they got migrant cities, migrant towns, whatever they want to call them. You got them in New York, Chicago, and stuff like that. And you will see how they're funding these illegal immigrants to live in these cities, these big towns, to push their base, to be their base. You had Joe Biden, the president, sit on a Zoom call during the pandemic. I think this was 2020, 2021. I played the clip for y'all on the show. How he told these so-called black leaders of the so-called black community that you will not be in a position to do anything because these immigrants are coming. He told them this to their face. And this, what I said wasn't verbatim, but that's what he told them. Point blank and period. The government that was in place during the pandemic was telling people they can't come into this country. They can't leave the country. And if they left the country, they can't come back into the country without getting the juice. But now they letting all these immigrants, these quote unquote migrants, you gotta listen to the words that they use to describe this. They letting all these people into the country without any type of juice, no type of health, health test or nothing like that. It was a report out there that said that there was a measles outbreak in one of the Chicago migrant shelters. You've been having citizens in New York being harassed, assaulted, and even murdered by these same immigrants that they let in the country. There has been several reports out there talking about how Venezuela had let several of their prisoners out of their jail so they can be shipped over here because they didn't want to deal with them. Several reports of it. But of course, we so focused on fighting sides, you know what I'm saying? So we so blinded that we don't want to hear nothing else. But that's the Blackety Black Woke segment. But nah, let me finish off with this. You know what I'm saying? Just piggybacking off of that clip from the black dude that was talking about how black people don't want to work and don't want to do these jobs. That's bullshit. That is bullshit. There are plenty of people out here that want to work for the post office, black people that want to work for the post office. Speaking of it, that's all I see working for the post office, black people. Because that's a good government job. How about that? And when it comes to trades, plumbing and stuff like that, they took that shit out the schools years ago. That used to be a requirement in the schools where you had to learn a trade. The opportunities aren't out there for black people because the migrants or the immigrants, whatever you want to call them, are cheap labor. They're cheap labor. Black people who have built this country. Black Americans built this country. Black Americans will lose millions of jobs and opportunities because of the Democratic Party allowing these migrants or these immigrants to come over here to be cheap labor. It lowers the wages across all of the industries that are important to the structure of the country. So then it's going to get to the point where all types of social services and stuff aren't going to be available to black Americans because we ain't got no jobs. We ain't got no opportunities. We don't have any incentives, nothing. But I'll move on. That's the Blackety Black Woke segment. Let me move on to another clip. Here we go.
For instance, women love to connect. Men love to bond. Connecting requires talking. Connecting requires getting to know, developing a level of intimacy, having heart-to-heart conversations. Men love to bond. When men get together with other men, they don't necessarily have to talk because the experience that they're enjoying together doesn't always require communication, but yet they bonded. And so our natural inclination is to bond with our wives and to connect with our husbands, and sometimes that creates a disconnect because we're wired differently. One of the other challenges that we've realized is that oftentimes men are very literal in their communication and women are feeling oriented in their communication. So when a woman is sharing with you how she feels, she's telling you how she may feel in the moment. And so in the midst of an argument or something, she may say something based upon how she feels at that moment, but that man hears it and takes it literally and will hold on to it for years. And so sometimes we build up all of this resentment and this bitterness and this frustration about something that somebody said in 1952 that we still held on to because we were very literal in what we heard our partner say. But if we realize that we just communicate differently, it'll help us to effectively engage in conversation that makes sense. And so another challenge that is...
So, just because men and women communicate differently, or we were programmed to communicate differently, because it really is a program, and it's about understanding that difference or that programming doesn't mean that it's right. It's not right that, you know what I'm saying, just because men, we are more logical or we're more literal than women doesn't mean we can't be emotional or connect with our feelings, and vice versa. You know what I'm saying? Just because women are more emotional and they connect more with their feelings doesn't mean that they can't be logical or literal. You know what I'm saying? It's about understanding, but it's easier to just fight and combat and say who's wrong and right in these situations as opposed to just being understanding, because we don't know that. You know what I'm saying? All we know is what we have been programmed and to think and to how to communicate. That's how we were programmed. You know what I'm saying? Like I've talked about plenty of times before, women have been pushed this narrative of how they supposed to see things with movies, cartoons, and stuff like that. And men, we've been pushed to look at it the way that we looked at it based on societal, pressures and stuff like that. But that doesn't mean that that's right or that's the right way. Naturally, yeah, to a degree, that's how we are wired. But that doesn't mean that we can't, move to a different side, or, have a different way of looking at thing or a different perception of it. But it's about understanding, and we aren't taught to be understanding. That's not a narrative or a program that's pushed to be understanding. I talked about earlier about the bonding thing, and yeah, men, when we get together with each other, it's different than when women get together with each other. But that doesn't mean that that's always burp number 8, burp number 9. That doesn't mean that it's a right way of connecting. Burp number 10. And that doesn't mean that we can't do something different. Just because we can bond without communicating doesn't mean that communication isn't important. From a male's point of view, being in a relationship with your homeboys or your brother or whatever you want to call them is a different relationship with being with your significant other or your partner. You have to navigate those relationships differently. But one, you have to understand that those relationships are different. 2, you have to understand that you have to open yourself up to being a different person in those relationships. 3, you have to have a safe environment to actually be or open up that way in those relationships. Just because men bond with each other in a certain way don't mean we have to go into our relationships with our lady and do the same thing. That ain't right. And for a time I thought that was the case, but that's not right. And even with your boys, that doesn't mean you can't push something differently or invite something differently into the relationship. You know what I'm saying? And I feel like that's where a lot of relationships fail, because we're afraid to do things that are different than the norm or what we were told we were supposed to do, because we feel like we're going to be rejected or we're going to be abandoned. But the more and more that I'm learning, the more and more I've gotten older, I've grown and stuff like that. You have to introduce these things. You just got to be yourself. Be yourself no matter what. And that's how you will find out who's for you and who's not. And that doesn't mean that the people who aren't for you are bad people. That just means that they aren't for you. They aren't the right it isn't the right environment for you. It isn't the right environment for you to continue to grow, to evolve as a person. Because no matter what, that is essentially what life is about, to continue to grow and evolve as a person. Drop my phone. Yeah, but I think a lot of times, we're so programmed with how society has put us, in place, that we look at a lot of the things that we do when it comes to relationships as just, practical duties. It's just routine. It's routine for us to do these things because that's what we know, or that's what we've seen, or that's what we've been, we've been taught, whether it comes from our parents, TV, movies, or the overall society of things when it comes to like school and stuff like that. But we have to start emphasizing true connection with a person. And you can only really connect with a person if you're being yourself, not playing a role, not playing society's role, or the role that you were taught from your mother, or the role you were taught from your father. It has to be a genuine, authentic connection. And the only way that it can be authentic and genuine is by you actually being yourself. And if you don't know yourself, then you have to figure out who you are, what you like, what you don't like. The things that you agree with, the things that you don't agree with. It has to become, you have to first connect with yourself. And I forgot, I was talking to somebody a couple of weeks ago about this. Like, you can't really have a real relationship until you understand who you are as a person. But the way the world is, how society is set up, everything comes down to practical duties. And when I say practical duties, is what's right and wrong for society. And you may not agree with everything that society says, but because it's quote unquote common sense, or it's what everybody else is doing, then that is deemed as being right, or it's deemed as being wrong. We got to stop getting so caught up into worrying about what everybody else thinks. And I'm saying that to you because I'm saying it to myself. It's funny because I was in the gym today, and this is something that I noticed a while ago in the gym. And I'm going to prove to you how people are so caught up into being followers, right? So you got in the gym, right? In my gym, you got a trash can, and connected to that trash can, you got two paper towel dispensers, along with 2 cleaning solution bottles. It's been so many times where I've been at this trash can getting paper towels from one side of the paper towel dispenser, where a person would come up and stand behind me and wait for me to get paper towels out of that paper towel dispenser. as opposed to go on the opposite side to get paper towels for themselves. And even outside of me standing at that paper towel dispenser, I've watched people do that with other people. This shows you how programmed that society is today, that you don't have the critical thinking skills for you to go on the opposite side and get paper towels for yourself so you can clean the machine off. It boggles my mind. I would literally be standing at the paper towel machine getting paper towels for myself, and somebody will walk up behind me, and I would turn around and look at them and be like, why are you standing behind me? It's another paper towel machine right across from me. But this shows you right here how people are so programmed to be followers. They're so programmed to be caught up into the practical duties of life, the common sense thing to do. That's why it took me a long time to get away from the thinking of common sense. Common sense is not the way. Critical thinking is the way. Because common sense will lead you down a path of doing things that you may not agree with. But moving on. I got another clip for you.
If you do therapy correctly, you're going to see you more than you see anybody else in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it incorrectly, everybody else.
It's everybody else's fault.
I am so grateful you slowed down on that point, because I don't even think, as much as I'm an advocate for it, and we talk about it a lot in here, I've never been able to hone in on the people that go and nothing about them changes. 30 years and you still disconnected from a conversation?
Yes. Because the therapists, not all of them,
But they're enabling you.
they're enabling, and they also haven't done the work themselves.
Yep.
So how can you give therapy to somebody if you have never done the work yourself?
Absolutely.
And you're not showing up in the world the way you're telling these people they need to show up in the world.
That's
and
right.
they're probably actually not even telling them they need to show up in the world like that.
Yep.
And my mom has had that has been one therapist after another, and it's been the same.
The way that I describe what you just said is people can only take you to the last place they've been.
Mm-hmm. Correct.
And if
That's a great way to put it.
right,
Yes.
and so if you've never been there and you're trying to get to the mall, go east.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's this general flailing of the arm of like, it's somewhere in that direction.
Right.
What I thought was interesting about this clip was the fact that they was talking about how going to therapy and how your therapists aren't challenging you and stuff like that. And I've talked about that. I say that so much. I talked about I say that phrase so much. I talk about this plenty of times before, how therapists are just human, just like the rest of us. And that's why when I've had several therapists over the 10 plus years that I've been going to therapy. That's why I make sure I emphasize to the therapist, I need you to give me homework. I do better with homework. Having homework, I need to be held accountable. I need to be challenged. You know, I need to do the work. And by me doing the work, I need you to give me homework. It's a lot of people out here that are giving solicited advice that ain't done shit, ain't trying to do shit. It sounds good, so they want their moment. And it's an earlier part of this clip. I'm gonna play it back so I can talk about it, that I thought was real important. The main importance of this clip for me. So let me start it from the beginning and play it, and I'll stop it when I get to it.
If you do therapy correctly, you're going to see you more than you see anybody else in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
If you do it incorrectly, everybody else.
It's everybody else's fault.
That was it. And before I started going to therapy, I looked at things as always being everybody else's fault. I had a victim mentality. I was always saying it as this person doing something to me, or da 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 da, whatever you want to say, however you want to say it. But when I started going to therapy and I really started understanding myself and the things I've been going through and stuff like that, I had to learn, and it's become so much clearer to me even today, how you have to really understand yourself, your triggers, your traumas, and how they affect you, your childhood and stuff, and how it mirrors things that has gone on in your life as an adult, currently, in the past, whatever. But if you work on those things, if you put in the work, if you start your healing journey, then those things will be corrected. Not necessarily, I think corrected is the wrong term. You will have a different perception of those situations. They will look different to you. They will look different to you in terms of you having the control as opposed to somebody else having the control over you. It will no longer be you blaming somebody else for doing something to you as opposed to you having a boundary in place for what you want to accept and not accept, or what spaces are safe for you and what spaces aren't safe for you. But I'm going to move on from that clip. I got another one. Here we go.
You do not have a communication problem in your relationship. You do not have a love language problem. You do not have a compatibility problem. What you have is a wounded inner child problem. This is why most couples therapy or pop relationship advice out there does not work. They're only trying to chip away at the very top surface of this iceberg when over 80% of it is submerged beneath the surface, in our nervous system, in our subconscious. For example, one person often feels alone, unseen, and unheard, while the partner feels suffocated, controlled, and criticized. One person can't relax unless a conflict is fixed immediately, and the other can't relax unless they completely avoid the conflict. You see, these emotional pains are familiar, and if you were to sit with them long enough, instead of blaming your partner, you will see that these pains go way back in time, before this current or past relationship, all the way back to childhood. We think it's our partner's job to soothe these pains to finally help us feel whole. But if you think like this, you're going to be running that hamster wheel forever. You might even be on that hamster wheel right now. You see, it's our job to face and heal that pain inside, which does come from our childhood, and as well as from their own childhood. There is no ignoring or running away from it. The answer to your relationship problems comes from within. And by working with the right support systems and processes, which I guide clients through, you can heal these core wounds in a very deep way and end this painful.
Yeah, but you see how that clip lined up with the last clip and what I've been talking about. And I promise you, that love language episode is coming. I've been working on that love language episode. Well, I ain't gonna say I've been working on it. Well, I kind of been working on it, kind of not been working on it, but that love language episode is coming. But yeah, I'm gonna go through this clip again and pause and play through it, because I thought it was very interesting, and it is very true, like what I've been saying. But I think two things can be true at one time. But we're going to go through the clip again. I think the communication is important, but at the same time, the triggers are real, but let me go through the clip again.
You do not have a communication problem in your relationship. You do not have a love language problem. You do not have a compatibility problem.
I think all those things are important. They may be more surface than the deeper issue, but they are important. You may still have a communication problem based off of your trauma. You may have a love language problem based off of your trauma. You may have a compatibility problem based off of your trauma. Is some things are just more surface level and some things are more deeper than the other. I think all those things are important, but I think, you know what I'm saying, just based off of the critical thinking skills or being more self-aware of and understand who you are as a person, that you will understand what actually is more important in that moment. Is the communication more important than the trigger or the trauma? Or is the love language more important than the trigger or the trauma? Is the compatibility more important than the trigger and trauma? I think all those things matter. They all have an importance. It's just the level of importance when it comes to you as a person and understanding yourself and the person that you're dealing with.
What you have is a wounded inner child problem. This is why most couples therapy
because you can have this is when it comes down when I talk about mirroring. You know what I'm saying? Two things can be true at one time. Yes, this situation right now could be triggering my inner child, but that doesn't mean that the person that I'm dealing with isn't actually doing the same thing that I experienced as a child. And what is important about that is that I haven't healed from that situation enough to keep allowing this, or to put a boundary in place, or to be vulnerable enough to communicate this with my partner, to tell them, hey, look, you know what I'm saying, this situation right here, you know, when we get into disagreements and stuff, and you shut down and you just you ghost me or whatever, you know, that's something that I've gone through in the past, and that's something that I don't want to continue going through. So, you know, if you want to, if us being together is important to you, then this can't be something that you do. You know what I'm saying? You can let me know that you need space for a couple of minutes and then we'll revisit it later. Then that's cool. But just, you know what I'm saying, communicate with me and let me know what you need in this moment. So then I won't be trying to guess what you trying to do. Then that's cool. But you continuing to do this doesn't work for me. You know, it causes me a lot of pain, frustration, anxiety and stuff. And if you don't want to handle it differently, then I would prefer you to let me know. And then, you know what I'm saying, then we might have to move on. Simple as that, you know what I'm saying? But, you know, these are the things that we aren't taught. We aren't taught these things from our from our parents. We aren't taught these things in school or anything like that. Like the example that I just laid out for you, I learned that from going through therapy and just understanding who I am as a person and the things that trigger me and the things that, you know what I'm saying, I've gone through in the past with my parents and stuff like that.
Pop relationship advice out there does not work. They're only trying to chip away at the very top surface of this iceberg when over 80% of it is submerged beneath the surface, in our nervous system, in our subconscious. For example, one person often feels alone, unseen, and unheard, while the partner feels suffocated, controlled, and criticized. One person can't relax unless a conflict is fixed immediately, and the other can't relax unless they
And that's why it's important to have this communication. But that that connection comes from being vulnerable and letting, you know what I'm saying, your partner know the things that have gone on in your life, the things that make you uncomfortable and stuff like that. But we're afraid to let these things go because, you know what I'm saying, we don't want to be rejected, we don't want to be abandoned and stuff like that. But, you know what I'm saying, I mean, that connection, it all comes down to that connection, and that connection is an umbrella for a lot of things.
completely avoid the conflict. You see, these emotional pains are familiar, and if you were to sit with them long enough, instead of blaming your partner, you will see that these pains go way back in time before this.
And you also have a responsibility when you when you are self-aware and you understand who you are as a person and your triggers and your trauma and stuff, to work on these things. You can't put that burden or that responsibility on your partner to fix for you. You just can't. Like, honestly, I feel like that's what we've been taught to do. We've been taught to look to our partner, the person that we're in a relationship with, to heal us, to make us feel complete, whole, and all that other stuff. Shit, think about it. The Jerry Maguire movie, when he was standing there in the living room talking about you complete me. Nobody completes you but your damn self. You got to do your own work. Your parents can't do it, especially when you're an adult. Your parents can't do it when you're an adult. When you're an adult, it's your responsibility. And that's what my mentor told me. That's what pushed me to go to therapy. I got to take responsibility for myself. You know what I'm saying? I can't keep blaming my parents for the stuff that they did and didn't do. At this point, I was 29, 30 years old at the time. He had me right there, told me right to my face, you can't keep blaming them. You got to go to therapy. And I went to therapy. Shoot. Granted, and you know what I'm saying, I'm not 100% healed, and you never will. You know what I'm saying? Every healing is not linear. You know what I'm saying? There'll always be ups and downs, different lessons and challenges with it or whatever. But just being aware of these things and actually working on them will allow you to be a better steward in these situations, in these moments.
Current or past relationship, all the way back to childhood. We think it's our partner's job to soothe these pains, to finally help us feel whole. But if you think like this, you're going to be running that hamster wheel forever. You might even be on that hamster wheel.
You're going to be running that hamster wheel forever. Using his example, you're going to be jumping from person to person, talking about this nigga ain't shit, this man ain't shit, this girl ain't shit, all itches are the same, all O's are the same. You know what I'm saying? It's always going to be you looking for somebody to save you.
Right now, you see, it's our job to face and heal that pain inside, which does come from our childhood and as well as from their own childhood. There is no ignoring or running away from it. The answer to your relationship problems comes from within, and by working with the right support.
Within. It comes from within. And he's absolutely right. It comes from within. It absolutely comes from within. But, yeah, just speaking on the communication aspect, just, you know what I'm saying, piggybacking off of one of the tales and the lies of the, burp number 11, 12. One of the tales and the lies of society is that women are better communicators than men. When it we all work in progress. You know, it ain't, we got to stop this competition, this measuring of things or whatever. All of us are work in progress. You know, just because women communicate more don't mean that they better communicators. And this is coming from a communications major. You know what I'm saying? I got my degree in communications. I thought I was just the greatest communicator in the world. I thought I was just so proficient in communicating because I had a degree in communication. Man, when I finally started going to therapy and learning about myself and just learning shit, period, just growing, I was nowhere near a good communicator. I had some technical knowledge, but real life world problem solving, no, no, not at all. You know, listening, understanding, and comprehending is what makes great communication. And in a lot of ways, we have fell short on that. But let me move on. I'm about to end the show off in a minute. But let me move on to a clip or two and see, you know what I'm saying, see where we go.
If you ask the average person what their love language is, it's a good chance they'll be able to clearly articulate to you what they understand is the language that their heart speaks or how they respond when they get what they desire. But if you ask those same individuals, what is your trauma response? Or what language does your pain speak or your stress speak? They will hesitate, they will deflect, or they won't be as responsive. What if we placed just as much energy into what we understand we need as how we respond when we don't get what we need? If we became more aware of how we respond when we don't get the things that we desire or when we may be triggered, we will have healthier relationships, because the best thing that you can bring to any relationship is a better version of you. The best thing you can give someone else is self-awareness and accountability. So I'm all for love languages, but I want you to also be well informed of your trauma responses and your pain points and the language that your stress speaks, because there's a good chance in your relationship, in your covenant, they will encounter you more times than not when you don't get what you desire. And you need to, and your partner needs to know, who are you when things don't go your way?
Huh, man. And this is what I was just talking about. The love language stuff is important, but you see like the stuff that is being put is more pushed by society, as opposed to, the things that really matter. And love language is a popular thing. You know what I'm saying? That is popular. It's a popular topic. But is it really moving the needle or progressing relationships and stuff like that? And I'm going to go through and play the clip again and go through some of the stuff. But basically, you know what I'm saying, he was talking about, we understand, it's cool to understand what your love language is and all that other stuff. And that's just surface level. So you're basically connecting off surface level shit. You know what I'm saying? But people still not going deeper. They're afraid to go deeper. You start talking about this trauma response. A lot of people don't understand what their traumas are because they aren't going to therapy. They aren't diving deeper into, or they don't even understand what's not normal or what's not healthy. So if you don't know what's healthy and what's not normal to you in your life as a person, then you're going to think what society has taught you, or what you learned from your parents or so from your parents or your grandparents or your aunties and uncles and stuff, their relationships, and you're going to think that that's normal, that that's healthy, that that's how things should be. But we got to understand, particularly in the Black community, that we've been playing on the playing field that we've been on has been very low. It's been very low for years, for decades. So we haven't been conducting ourselves in a healthy manner when it comes to relationships.
If you ask the average person what their love language is, it's a good chance they'll be able to clearly articulate to you what they understand is the language that their heart speaks or how they respond when they get what they desire.
Right. And that's man, boy. And that's how a lot of people are conducting them. That's the way society has been going when it comes to relationships. And what I've noticed a lot when it comes to the Black community and Black relationships, soon as somebody don't get what they want, it's a problem. It's a problem, whether it's financially, what aesthetically, it's a problem. If you can't show it off, or if it isn't what your good girlfriend is getting, or if it isn't what your favorite celebrity ain't getting or showing off and all this other stuff, it's a problem.
But if you ask those same individuals, what is your trauma response? Or what language does your pain speak or your stress speak? They will hesitate, they will deflect, or they won't be as responsive. What if we placed just as much energy into what we understand we need as...
A lot of people don't understand what they need because they don't understand themselves. They aren't self-aware. They don't have any type of critical thinking skills. They don't know how to think for themselves. They are living through other people. They are living through other people that are in their life or other people that they idolize. So they can't tell you who they are as a person or what they feel or what's painful to them, because they basing it off of somebody else.
How we respond when we don't get what we need. If we became more aware of how we respond when we don't get the things that we desire, or when we may be triggered, we will have healthier relationships. Because the best thing that you can bring to any relationship is a better version of you.
And that better version of you comes from understanding yourself, being self-aware, being able to be a critical thinker and understand situations. Is this a real situation? Is this my insecurities? Am I, you know what I'm saying, projecting onto somebody else? Am I being vulnerable? I mean, come on now, what?
Best thing you can give someone else is self-awareness and accountability. So I'm all for love languages, but I want you to also be well informed of your trauma responses and your pain points and the language that your stress speaks, because there's a good chance in your relationship, in your covenant.
One thing I learned about myself when I started going to therapy and going back and looking at how I conducted myself over time in certain relationships and stuff like that, and not just talking about romantic relationships period. I was in a lot of pain, and I was expressing that pain in a way that wasn't healthy, and I wasn't aware of that pain, and it was expressed in a lot of anger and aggression and stuff like that. And it was just crazy because when I go back to certain situations, I'd be like, damn, at this moment, this is how I was feeling. But I didn't know how to express it, or I was afraid to express it because I didn't want to look weak, or I didn't want to be judged, or I didn't want to, you know what I'm saying, be called a name or something.
They will encounter you more times than not when you don't.
I basically didn't want to reveal my true self, or I didn't know how to do that.
Get what you desire, and you need to, and your partner needs to know, who are you when things don't go your way.
And one of the key words that he just said was desire. And I'm going to end the podcast off here after I say this. One of the things that I've learned just about connection, you know what I'm saying? You can connect, you can easily connect with a lot of people. But that doesn't mean that it's a true connection. As I played a lot of the clips in this episode, you can connect with a person on the surface level. And I've talked about that plenty of times before. And that's why I say there's a difference to me between using the term relationship and partnership. You can relate with anybody. You can connect with anybody on something. You know what I'm saying? As long as it's relatable. But just like loving a person, connection, you have to put in work with that. You know what I'm saying? A true connection, true love, a true partnership, you have to put in work. You have to be vulnerable. You have to be self-aware, understand who you are as a person, and be comfortable enough with yourself to share that with another person. And just speaking on the term of desire, one of the things that I've learned recently in the past couple of years, 2-3 years, is that if you don't have that connection, a true connection, then that desire won't be there for you to put in work, to be around the person, to spend time with a person, to share things with a person. Like, you'll connect when you connect. When it's time to connect, you'll connect. When it's time to relate, you'll relate. You know what I'm saying? If the basketball game coming up, or a big fight coming up, or if somebody's birthday coming up, or if you want to go out for a drink with a girl, you can go. If you want to, you know what I'm saying, go hang out with a girl, you can go. If you want to go to dinner, you can go. You know what I'm saying? And there's a lot of things that's being pushed on social media. These surface level connections, this surface level relating with a man and a woman is no type of true connection, no true partnership, no true work being put in to these spaces, these connections, these people. You know what I'm saying? So that desire, if you're not putting in work to have a true connection with a person, then there isn't going to be any desire to be around a person, to spend time with a person, to be vulnerable with a person, to relate with a person. And I've noticed that so much more in the past couple of years with my relationships. You know what I'm saying? If a person isn't trying to understand me, if a person isn't trying to go deeper, then I'm not going to have that desire to put in any work or effort into this connection. If a person isn't opening up to me, if a person isn't communicating with me, if I don't feel that I can communicate with this person without being judged, if I can't communicate with this person without being rejected or abandoned and stuff, then I'm not going to have that desire to be around them or to put in work and stuff with them. You know what I'm saying? And that goes for sexual intimacy as well. You know what I'm saying? If you're dealing with a significant other and stuff like that, if that person isn't opening up to you and stuff like that, then that's going to affect the physical as well. You know, so it's just all about understanding who you are and being comfortable enough to open up and share that with somebody else. That's where true connection comes from, and that's where the desire will build. You know what I'm saying? Two people will want to be around each other more, spend time with each other more, want to learn more, you know what I'm saying, from one another. You know what I'm saying? By connecting. But a lot of people don't know how to connect. It's a connection malfunction. It's a connection malfunction. But I'm about to get out of here. You know what I'm saying? I'll continue, you know what I'm saying, the rest of the clips and topics and stuff on the next episode. And it's a Taste to Consider podcast. I'm your host, Derek Silver, and I'm out.